Who would have thought Nico Hulkenberg would turn Silverstone into the place where he finally grabbed his long-awaited moment in the spotlight? After 239 starts and countless missed chances, he climbed onto the podium, an achievement that sparked an intense debate inside the Red Bull camp. The big question: should they consider bringing Nico into the fold from 2026? It sounds surprising, maybe even far-fetched, especially since Nico is tied with the Audi project. But sometimes, an unexpected door opens at just the right time in someone's career. For Hulkenberg, this could be that door. What makes things even more interesting is the recent run of performances. Over the past 5 races, Nico and the Sauber team have managed to collect more points than Red Bull itself. Let that sink in. The team that was once dominating is now trailing behind a squad that no one saw coming. After a solid points haul in Austria, Nico made the headlines again in Silverstone, not just for scoring a podium, but for doing it by passing some of the biggest names in the sport. He crossed the line ahead of Hamilton and Verstappen. That's not just a good race, it's a statement. Starting from 19th and finishing in the top 3. That's no fluke. Every pit stop, every tire change, every strategic call from Sauber clicked perfectly. It was one of those days when everything lined up. But what it really exposed was something deeper about Red Bull's current issues. Max Verstappen, no matter how good, can't carry the entire team alone when the car isn't performing at its best. Red Bull's second seat has been a rotating door lately. Perez, Lawson, Tsunoda, they've all struggled to find consistency, especially now that the car is not at the level it once was. While Max used to dominate and cover for the weaknesses, that cover is now fading fast. When the machine starts to show cracks, the importance of having a solid backup becomes crystal clear. Verstappen might be one of the finest talents Formula One has seen in recent times, but expecting him to pull off miracles every weekend isn't realistic, especially with a car that's struggling to keep up. And this is exactly where the conversation about the second driver becomes so crucial. In the earlier part of this season, Red Bull's setup didn't demand much from the second driver. Max was sweeping race after race, covering almost every base. But now, with the performance edge slipping, that missing piece next to Verstappen is being felt more than ever. There was a time when Carlos Sainz seemed like the natural fit for that seat, but the timing wasn't right. He didn't want to step into a role where he'd be clearly supporting someone else. After all, Sainz had already raced alongside Max back in their Toro Rosso days, and he wasn't eager to repeat that dynamic. Nico Hulkenberg, on the other hand, may have looked at the same opportunity from a different lens. Someone in his position, experienced, consistent, still hungry, jumped at the chance to drive for Red Bull, even if it meant being the number 2. There's no shame in that, especially when the team has the tools to fight at the front. The numbers don't lie either. Since the Spanish Grand Prix, Hulkenberg has picked up 31 points, Verstappen just 29. That alone is enough to turn heads. Nico is squeezing performance out of what many still consider to be one of the slowest cars on the grid. Meanwhile, Verstappen still has one of the better cars, despite the dip in development. It's not about comparing their legacy. First podium came after more than a decade in the sport, while Max already owns 4 world titles. But even legends need solid teammates beside them. Red Bull had that with Bottas supporting Hamilton at Mercedes a few years ago. He was never the lead man, but he always delivered when it mattered, qualifying strong, holding position, and playing a key role in strategy. That kind of dependable presence is what Red Bull's been missing lately. Looking back, Red Bull hasn't really found a consistent second driver since that 2021 season when Sergio Perez played his part well. That year, he backed Verstappen up when needed, especially in races where tactics made all the difference. But once the car began shifting away from its dominant form, Perez started facing problems. His struggles weren't isolated either, and Tsunoda have had their fair share of challenges in adapting to the changing nature of the Red Bull car. And that's what brings us to today's dilemma. With the way things are unfolding, Verstappen often finds himself in battles with both McLarens all on his own. There's no teammate in sight to help absorb pressure or create tactical openings. The way Mercedes used to run things too strong, drivers covering each other, Red Bull just hasn't been able to replicate that lately. This is where Hulkenberg starts looking like a missed opportunity. In Silverstone, he was just one corner away from lapping Tsunoda. Yes, you heard that right. Yuki, who picked up a 10-second penalty after a collision with Albon, finished dead last. Despite 2 Racing Bulls cars retiring, Tsunoda still couldn't climb anywhere near the points. That tells you something about his current form. He did manage to escape Q1 for the first time in a couple of races, but those minor improvements aren't translating into race day results. At this point, he's clearly the slowest among the Red Bull-affiliated drivers, and when you're part of an elite setup, just surviving the qualifying rounds isn't enough. You've got to score. So when was Red Bull's first shot at signing Hulkenberg? The answer takes us back to 2020. During the search for someone to replace Alex Albon, Nico was very much in the running then. That could have been the perfect time to bring him back into the sport, full-time under a top-tier outfit. Back in 2020, Nico Hulkenberg was sitting on the edge of a comeback. Red Bull was weighing its options for who could take over from Alex Albon, and Nico's name was right up there. At the time, the door was slightly open for him to return to the grid in a proper way, no last-minute stand-ins. No temporary gigs, but a full-time seat with a competitive team. It could have changed the entire course of his career, but Red Bull made their call. They went with Sergio Perez, a move that initially looked justified. Who could forget Perez's drive in Turkey? That season, he held off a charging Hamilton on a slippery track, defending like his life depended on it. Then came Abu Dhabi 8 seconds, taken out of Lewis's lead, and a perfect block that helped Verstappen in one of the most talked-about finales in F1 history. However, the problem wasn't with what Perez did when the car was at its best. The real trouble began once the car's performance dipped. That's when adaptation mattered most, and unfortunately, that's where he and others, like Lawson and Tsunoda, struggled. None of them were able to mold their driving styles around the shifting balance of the car. It's not just about speed anymore, it's about feedback, feel, and consistency under pressure, and that's exactly what Hulkenberg has been delivering this season. While others are still trying to figure out their setups on Fridays, Nico's already narrowing in on strategy and execution. His run since Spain has been nothing short of a machine. We're not talking about one lucky weekend. This is a pattern of good decisions, clean laps, and calculated aggression. So now, the question looms large. Would Red Bull be willing to look past past decisions and think about what's best for the team moving forward? There's another layer to this that makes Hulkenberg's recent success even more interesting. The change in leadership at Sauber. Jonathan Wheatley, a key figure from Red Bull's inner circle, left the team during a time when internal issues were piling up. He didn't just retire quietly or take a back-office job. Instead, he took over as team principal at Sauber and brought a level of discipline and vision that immediately paid off. Since his arrival, Sauber has gone from being a backmarker to a solid midfield threat, and Hulkenberg has been right at the center of that turnaround. This wasn't just about luck or a lucky weather call. It was about preparation, reading the race right, and executing with clarity. It's easy to forget how much influence a strong team principal can have on the garage environment and decision-making under pressure. Wheatley's leadership, combined with Nico's experience, created something very real and very competitive. Even Carlos Sainz, Hulkenberg's former teammate, has chimed in with praise. He pointed out how people kept using the lack of podiums against Nico, as if that one statistic defined his career. But for those who've worked with him closely, like Sainz did, the story was always different. It wasn't about raw numbers, but about consistent effort, sharp racing IQ, and the ability to bring the car home in positions it didn't belong in. Sainz even said the podium wasn't a surprise. To him, it was overdue. And now that Nico has finally broken that barrier, it's become clear to many that the narrative surrounding him was never fair. He didn't just luck into this moment, he built toward it for years. And that raises another point. Red Bull had the chance to grab him before Audi locked him down, but they let that moment pass. Now that Hulkenberg is finally proving what many insiders already knew, that he's more than just a reliable midfield driver, Red Bull may be facing the consequences of a missed opportunity. It's no longer just about who's fast on Saturday. It's about who can consistently deliver results, adapt quickly to changing track conditions, and bring calm decision-making in high-pressure moments. Nico has shown he can do all that and more. What makes this even more complicated for Red Bull is that they're in the middle of a transition phase. The RB21, which once looked unbeatable, is now showing cracks. Max Verstappen remains their biggest weapon, but one man can't hold an entire championship together, not when rival teams are closing in fast. McLaren is on a roll, Ferrari's upgrades are starting to work, and even Mercedes is waking up. So where does that leave Red Bull? They've burned through promising young drivers. Tsunoda hasn't stepped up. Lawson is still too green. Promotion is now uncertain because the team knows very well that putting a rookie in a shaky car can end careers before they start. Red Bull's history with their second seat hasn't just been about talent. It's been about throwing people into the fire and hoping they survive. And now, with Hulkenberg unavailable due to his commitment with Audi, Red Bull is short on options. They had their chance when he was eager to return to the grid and would have gladly partnered with Verstappen. That moment has passed. As it stands, Hulkenberg has done more than just prove doubters wrong. He's made it clear that he belonged at the top level all along. And while Audi plans its entry, Red Bull must now deal with the regret of what could have been a stable, experienced, no-nonsense driver backing up one of the greatest talents the sport has seen. The future remains uncertain for both sides. But one thing is clear, Nico Hulkenberg isn't the same driver he was a few years ago. He's sharper, more determined, and finally getting the results he was always capable of. Red Bull may never get that chance again.